This is, for me, the most brilliant scene in one of Hitchcock's most brilliant films. The stylistic uh, bravado of this scene is simply breathtaking. In this sequence, we see the unbridgeable gap between the human world and the bird world. What is the human world and the birds? Well, it's a world fraught with suffering, loneliness, feelings of abandonment, and ultimately a desperate quest for any kind of meaning, a quest that is ultimately unsuccessful. Think of Melanie Daniels. This is a socialite who has money and time enough to do whatever she wants. So she spends her time engaging in elaborate practical jokes on virtual strangers. So desperate is she for some sense of purpose, really just for something to do. And we understand why she is so desperate to connect with others, no matter what lengths she has to go to. When we hear her describe to Mitch the fact that her mother abandoned her when she was only 11 years old. So this sense of a wound that cannot be healed and an effort to try to heal it through connecting with others. This is true of Melanie, but it's also true of Mitch and Annie and Lydia in other ways. The human world in the birds is a very tragic one. Well, not even that, because tragedy, of course, suggests that suffering is somehow meaningful. The world of the humans and the birds is simply meaningless, but ironically meaningless. You have these characters striving diligently for some kind of meaning, but they simply cannot find it in the world. The fact that Melanie, in looking at the fire run from the car that explodes near the man getting ready to smoke the cigar and running to the other cars that explode, the fact that her gaze is disjointed, fragmented, I think is significant, because it shows that ultimately this is the nature of human life in Bodega Bay in San Francisco. The lives are fragmented. People themselves are fragmented between each other. They cannot overcome the gaps, but people themselves are torn between what they want of life and what they are getting from life. Meanwhile, there's this shift up to the point of view of the birds. How bold. Point of view has been Hitchcock's primary technique in this film for showing how humans try to connect with one another. Think of Melanie as she makes her way from the town of Bodega Bay to Mitch's house, leaves the lovebirds and starts sailing back. Well, as she looks at Mitch, we see a close-up of her face, and then we see what she is looking at, Mitch. Close up her face again, what she's looking at, Mitch. And this is a primary technique Hitchcock uses, where you see characters in close-up looking at what they desire, but ultimately struggle mightily to find what they desire. Here, ironically, we shift to the bird's point of view. What are they looking at? Well, nothing in particular. They don't look at one particular person with a desire to connect. They're animals. They're seeing the chaos down below that they've created, but of course they don't know this is chaos. They simply don't know. They fly because they fly. They attack because they attack. So there's a way in which their world is meaningless too, but not in the same way the human world is meaningless. The human world is meaningless, ironically, because humans are seeking for a meaning they cannot achieve. The meaninglessness of the bird's world is not ironic, because the behavior of the natural world has no meaning. What is the meaning of a bird flying? What is the meaning of a storm? What is the meaning of a flower? There are no meanings. Hitchcock once said, or more than once, he said that the film is about what happens when humans take nature for granted. Well, what we see here is that humans don't understand that the natural world is just as meaningless as their world is, but the natural world has the benefit of not seeking for the meaning that humans themselves seek. Now, another way that Hitchcock emphasizes the innate meaninglessness of the world, human and bird-wise, is that he does not provide a lush musical score for this film. Hitchcock was famous for his collaborations with Bernard Herrmann in films like Vertigo, North by Northwest, where you get these beautiful, lush scores that are fraught with information, fraught with meaning. Well, here the only remarkable sound effect are the squawks of the birds, which have no meaning at all. So that's another way in which Hitchcock emphasizes that this is a world where the final meaning is ultimately impossible, and this leaves humans in a state in which they would actually be relieved, strangely enough, if they could behave like the birds, if they could simply accept what is. But the humans are torn between what is and what they think ought to be, whereas the birds are simply in the world of isness. And this isness is ultimately utterly inscrutable to humans. As they constantly ask throughout the film, why are these birds attacking? Why are they attacking? Well, they don't know, and we never know. And the fact that the film itself finishes without an ending really emphasizes this lack of what people call closure. Normally a Hitchcock film would end with the words, the end. This film does not conclude in such a way. We simply see our primary characters driving down a lonely road with birds lined up on the lines, perhaps getting ready to attack, perhaps not, we don't know. So the film itself is open-ended. There's no sense of aesthetic closure at all. There's a sense that things simply happen. These things are happening now, other things will happen later.